Friends, as I mentioned yesterday, we have a very special Israeli writers delegation in this Festival of Letters 2018. I'm glad to welcome all of you for this edition of Indo-Israeli Writers Meet, and a warm welcome to all the writers from Israel and all the Indian writers who are assembled here. Friends, the cultural and trade relations between India and Israel date back to almost 1000 BCE. One can trace the references to Indian merchants in Babylonian Buddhist tale, references to Tarshish ships during King Solomon's reign, and many other texts of both the countries. There have been a number of studies on the similarities of and relationship between Hinduism and Judaism. It is a recorded fact that people of all communities in India have accepted and embraced Jews who migrated to the subcontinent. Till date, these followers of Judaism coexist in peace and mutual cooperation with other communities in Indian subcontinent. Both these countries have ancient and rich literary heritage. Both India and Israel had a variety of literary traditions and have had more than a brush of touch with mystical traditions and lineages. Again, both Israel and India are trying to revive ancient and dying languages. There is a concerted effort to revive Yiddish language and literature in Israel, while in India there is a movement to revive Sanskrit language and literature. The effort born out of reflection and understanding that a loss of any language is not merely a loss of tool for communication, but a loss of entire cultural heritage. Language and literature represents is bound to yield fruits sooner than later. Insofar as the physical aspects of cultural relations are concerned, waves of time and tidal changes of history have ensured that both these great countries remain separate. But the ancient relationship and exchanges have ensured that they remained close to each other despite the interference of political atmosphere. The 25th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Israel provide a wonderful opportunity to bring together best minds from literary and cultural and linguistic traditions of India and Israel. As part of the commemoration of the 25th anniversary, the Akademi sent a delegation of Indian writers to Israel in November 2017, and this meeting is reciprocation by Israeli Writers Association. We are thankful to the Embassy of India in Israel, Embassy of Israel in India, the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and Israeli Writers Association for making this possible. The meetings we had in Israel were very fruitful, and I hope today's meet will take our deliberations and cooperation further. Friends, Sahitya Akademi, the India's premier institution of letters, preserves and promotes literature in 24 recognized Indian languages. In addition to organizing literary events across the country and publishing books in these 24 languages, the Akademi also promotes Best of Indian Literature through its flagship project called Indian Literature Abroad and literary exchange programs with many countries across the globe. With these few words, I once again welcome the distinguished writers came from Israel and also the eminent writers from our Indian side. Before we proceed further, I would like to welcome our guests with a traditional kind of welcome from Sahitya Akademi side. I will request Uday Narayan Singh ji to welcome the leader of the delegation, Mr. Mayor. accelerated. So I'll just briefly introduce the distinguished writers from Israel. Miss Dorit Silverman is a well-known award-winning writer, literary critic and researcher, and she is considered to be one of the colorful figures in Israeli literary and bohemian life. The author has published 19 books including short stories, novels, children's books, research titles and academic publications. And Dr. Silverman has been teaching literature at leading Israeli universities and was the head of the creative writing department at Beit Well College. And she has been awarded prizes for her work and has attended many international seminars. A movie based on her novel won also an important international prizes. By profession, she is a lawyer, and in the year 2017 won the Prime Minister Award for Literature. And Dorit Silverman is the Vice President of the Hebrew Writers Association and Chairman of the Board of Mozneim, the Hebrew Writers Association's literary magazine. Welcome to Dorit Silverman. And we have with us Adiva Geffen. Is a prolific writer and a playwright, and she lectures and leads many writing workshops. And she is a board member of the Israeli Writers Association and the chairperson of Nazim, that's a treasurer of the Hebrew Writers Association, which is the biggest archive in the world of manuscripts and documents of Hebrew literature. Adiva has published 21 books including novels, children's stories, reference books and most famously suspense novels, most of which were bestsellers. In fact, Adiva is widely regarded as one of the best suspense writers in Israel, and her plays have appeared on major stages in Israel. Drawing from rich life experience and pure imaginative force, Adiva Geffen creates compelling characters and captivating scenarios in which suspense, humor, passion and joy are woven into an almost addicting emotional thrill ride. Her latest duo, detectives Sami and Dikla, have become staples in Israel's literary community. Welcome to Adiva Geffen. Hawa Pinhas Cohen. Hawa Pinhas Cohen He is an award-winning poet, translator, editor of poetry books, teacher of creative writing and lecturer on literature, and who has studied literature and art history, receiving a BA and MA from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and she is presently writing a doctoral thesis on the literatures of the Jews at Bar-Ilan University with a President's Fellowship. From 1989 to 2008, she edited Dimui, an interdisciplinary literary and art magazine. In 2007, she founded the Kisu Film, Jerusalem Conference for Jewish writers and poets from all over the world, of which she is the artistic director. And to date, she has been published 10 books of poetry and book of dialogues on poetry and art with the poet Israel Eliraz. A collection of short stories, I, the Man, is scheduled for publication in Hebrew and French this year, and her poems were translated into many languages. Hawa Pinhas Cohen is the mother of 4 daughters and lives in Jerusalem, Israel. And also with us, Avivit Levi Kapat. She is a poet, musician and scientist, and she is the initiator and co-producer of Mila Sheli, that is my word, the annual event for the Hebrew language in Netanya Cultural Hall in Israel. Since 2016, an editorial board member of the literary journals Sifas and Shivilim. Among her publications, the poetry books A Swallow in the Winter, Faces in the Stone, Voice from the Chest, The Right of Remain Silent. Also the musically composed poetry album Clear Words, since 2013, initiator, producer and performer of music poetry shows in culture centers all over Israel. She wrote also about the life and legacy of Rabbi Yosef Kappa, a monograph, and she won the Golden Inkwell honor mark from the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel, and she is a member of the poetry panel on Trees and Stones with the poets Agi Mishol, Amot Daphne and Avivit Levi, led by Professor Jiva Ben Porat. And we have with us Smadar Shir. Smadar Shir is one of the most known and popular authors, journalist and songwriter in Israel, and she has been productive for 45 years since the age of 15. And Smadar has published around 400 books for toddlers, infants and teenagers, many of which are studied in kindergartens and schools, and her songs are played regularly in every birthday party. She also authored 8 adult novels which became bestsellers and were appraised by reviewers, and some novels were translated to English and are sold on Amazon. Her book, The 10th, which was awarded numerous prizes, is currently being translated into Chinese. In parallel to her work as an author, she has been serving as a leading journalist at Edoit Haharonot, the leading newspaper in Israel, where she publishes on regular basis interviews with leading local and international people and opinion columns. Smadar is, okay, of course, a mother of whatever that way I think we have already circulated, and the leader of the delegation we have with us, Mr. Meir Ozier, is a prominent Israeli writer and journalist. For 40 years, he publishes his work at the Israeli press, and he is known especially for his weekly column named Shipudim in the daily newspaper Mariv. Shipudim is a humorous and satirical column with a sharp critical tone. And this personal page, which is a style between literature and journalism, Mr. Meir has written hundreds of articles and reports and created television programs. To date, he has published 11 books, 7 wit, satire and humor books, and 4 novels, and won the Jews Literary Prize. And today, he writes a weekly opinion column for Mariv, daily newspaper, and is the artistic director of the Hebrew Writers Association. and he also produces literary plays at one of Israel's most prestigious theatres. Welcome to Mr. Meir Wozula. And we have in our midst Miss Ruma Manzoor. She is a cultural attaché from Embassy of Israel. She has just joined. Okay. Before we proceed further, I request all our Indian friends to introduce themselves briefly, just 1 or 2 lines. Let us start with Marlon. Just name and what you are.
I am Marlon. I am a bilingual writer. I write in Tamil as well. I write short stories, poems, and I am also a journalist.
Ubenarayan Singh, we write in Maitri in Bangla. What is your Akademi award for I write many plays and poems in Maitri. Critical essays and poetry. Fiction.
I am Dr. Shashi, Shyam Singh Shashi. I met him this year. And poet and anthropologist. I've worked on, I told you.
Neeraj Soni, cultural journalist.
I am Professor Dr. Kamal Kumar. I am teaching in the Delhi University and also I am a writer. I have done fiction, I have done poetry, I have done some features and on women also. So I have published 35 books and 5 are still coming. Thank you.
This is Shubodh Sharkar. I am a Bengali writer. I am Vedut Joshi, writing in Gujarati.
I am Ravindra Narayan Mishra. I am a special metropolitan magistrate in Delhi. I write in Maithili and English.
This is Darshan Darshi. I write in a regional language called Dogri, spoken in Jammu region of Jammu and Kashmir. I write poetry, fiction, essays, literary. Thank you.
I am Rajan Anand, health-related writer.
I am Shahid Kak Nizam, writing in Urdu.
I'm Rajiv Singh from Doordarshan.
Dr. Amarnath Amar, writer, producer, Doordarshan Delhi.
Amar Modi, I translate and write in Bangla and English.
Vaste Moi, writer, poet, Sindhi.
Ashutosh Bharadwaj, I write both in Hindi and English, and I am a fiction writer as well as a journalist.
I am Varsha Das, I write in Gujarati, Hindi and a little bit in English.
I am Leeladhar Mandoi, I am a poet and non-fiction writer, and I am editor of one of the leading magazines of Hindi.
Chandrasekhar Reddy, Telugu, literary critic and poet.
I am Nasa Sharma, novelist and short story writer and translator also. I translate the Israeli very famous lady writer Nurit Zarek. And here is a book which conveys this. Thank you.
I am Dr. D.J. Bora. I am a service writer from Assam and also I write in English. Basically, I like novels and history and travelogues. Thank you.
Ashok K. Khanna from Akademi of Indo-Israeli Literature, trilingual poet, editor, critic, translator as well. I have brought some 5 old journals in which Israeli poets are included. I would like to present these to you. We have journals, Indo-Asian literature, covering almost entire Asia, including the foremost and Israeli poets. being friendly to your Delhi Kohen, as also Abraham Yehusha. That is right, that he is proud of. There are my utmost regards for you. And here I say, you resemble Abraham Yehusha.
Thank you, Nana. So, see, the program will be like this. Our friends from Israel, they are going to present a very short, some either their works or a speech. And after that we will have an open interaction with them. So let us start with Madam Dorit.
I want to read something on behalf of the chairman and the board. I want to say a few things in behalf of our chairman and second. The Israeli Writers Association perceive the great significance of international literary relations. The Hebrew Writers Association takes particular care to maintain ties with other literary organizations in the world whose aim is to bring writers together through writers' associations or other similar institutes. We believe that conversations and encounters between writers can enrich both the entire world culture as well as each individual writer. The visit of a delegation of Indian writers which arrived in Israel in November 2017 was one of the highlights of our international activities. The ties that we created with each of the writers from India and with Sahit Akademi are of great importance to us, and these ties will continue.
Okay. So, this one is okay? Can speak? First of all, I congratulate all of you writers and poets from India, so many that came here today. Thank you so much for coming. And before everything, I really want to thank Dr. Rao personally, who became my friend, and you did a lot for this, for the organization of this meeting. And I want to thank, of course, the Akademi and all the other organs that took place in organizing this visit. In the name of the Hebrew Writers Association and in the name of Writers of Israel, I thank you all. I want to thank also Mr. Jyoti Krishan Rana, that after being in touch with him for almost a year now, we finally met. The visit of the writers' delegation from India to Israel was a great achievement, both of literary importance and personal friendships. Being part of a delegation of writers from Israel to India, and before that, hosting the delegation of writers from India in Israel, from my point of view, it is not merely an organizational act. I consider it a literary and almost spiritual, artistic act. Those meetings create something by themselves. I consider it a literary, as I say, an artistic act of the highest order. Connections between writers, and more than that, connections between institutes of writers in the world, and for us, especially between Israel and the world, are very, very important. And I emphasize that the connections of institutes of writers are even sometimes more important than personal contacts because they continue. I tell you in some words what is the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel. In Hebrew, it says the name is Agudat HaSofrim. It was founded in 1921. Its founders were the best of the Hebrew literature of that time, such as Bialik, or Shaul Sherbikovsky, or Chaim Azaz, and then others were our presidents like Yaakov Orlan, Abba Kovner, Nathaniel Natan, Shulamit Lapid, and many others. Some of the names maybe you know, but of course we are a small language and not all the names are known to all the world. Today's chairperson is the writer Tzvika Nir, which Dr. David Zilberman, the writer Dr. David Zilberman, produced his words to you. Unfortunately, he could not participate in this delegation. Over the years, the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel has represented the best names of Hebrew literature. Today, the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel has more than 500 members, writers, poets, and literary researchers at various levels of involvement with organizational activities. The Hebrew Writers Association holds a large number of literary events every year. Over the past year, 2017, the Writers Association held more than 100 events, including book launches, reading events, discussions on books and literature, symposia, participation in literary festivals, and more. And the Hebrew Writers Association also maintain international relations, as we say, and we also grant literary awards, including the prestigious Brenner Prize, and we initiate special literary activities and operates Beta Sofer, which means the house of the writer, in Tel Aviv, in the central cultural zone of Tel Aviv, which is the home of the literature and our offices. The Hebrew Writers Association also publishes the literary magazine Oznaim, which means a scale, that appears 6 times a year, and it is the most ancient, let's say, literary magazine that appears regularly in the Hebrew literature. We also operate a museum, which is the word means treasure of the Hebrew Writers Association that you had before. It contains the archive of the Hebrew writers' manuscripts. I think that maybe someday some people will say to me that it is time that I myself should surrender and give my archive to this archive. And then I go to tell you something about my literary work. I wrote 4 novels and 7 books that contains mostly collections of humor and satire that I wrote in the newspaper. My last novel deals with the question why man needs a leader. I mean, why we men needs a leader which is human like us. And this is a question that humankind and the Jewish people have been struggling with ever since the beginning of time, from the time of the Bible, 3,500 years ago, and as a matter of fact, my novel takes place 500 years ago, before we nominated our first king, which was an act that in the Bible, it's not sure if it's a good act or if it's a bad act. From my point of view, the novel, to the heroes of my novel, it was not a good act. No man should have a leader, no man should have a king. Speaking of the moment when I'm facing the paper with the pen in my hand, or as it more correct to say today, in front of the computer, Well, I published for 40 years a personal page. This is a great privilege for a journalist to have. A personal page in the newspaper Maariv, which was at that time, and for a very long time, the most important and the most biggest newspaper in Israel. Today it's not the most biggest anymore. Well, maybe from my point of view, it still is the most important. And I'm still writing in my newspaper Maariv. But the page that I wrote was not only journalism, it was something between journalism and literature, and it contains also many, let's say, humor and satire pieces. I just want to finish, I don't want to be long, I just want to give you some examples. Of course, humor is very, very difficult to translate. So I will, as an example, I will read some lines I wrote as kind of aphorism. Let's see if it will work in English to an Indian audience. So one line says like this: how come there are so many cooking programs in the television and there is not even one dishwashing program? And if we think politically, Israel, you know, we are still in war for 2,000 years. It's a short time, only 2,000 years, but the war is still going on, and we want to live in this world. So I wrote it in one line. Oh, it is so difficult for us Israelis, being a small country, waging peace against the old world. I don't know if it passes, but this is some examples of my life. Thank you so much. So now I will ask Adiva Geffen, the writer Adiva Geffen, to say some words. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Very happy to hear you. Sorry about my voice, but we understand each other. So my name is Adiva. In Hebrew, it means politely or maybe gently. I think it's a very funny word for a baby, but it's my name, and I'm keeping it. It's very rare name in Israel. So I wrote 25 books, most of them are thrillers. So people asking me, you look like a okay lady. Why you're dealing with murders and blood and bad guys? You know, when I start writing, I ask myself, what am I going to write about? What kind of books am I going to write? So I remember that one in Salinger books, you know Salinger? The big American writer. In one of his books, a guy is asking his brother, you know, a very famous scriptwriter in Hollywood. I also want to write something. What about I'm going to write? So the answer was, write about something you love to read. So that's me. I love to read thrillers. I like to see movies with, you know, murders and so, you know, like Hitchcock and so on. So I write about what I love, and I love write my thrillers. And you know something, to be serious, I think that in these days, thrillers are very naive because the world is not like in the thrillers. It's not bad and good. And you know, in thrillers, there is always a detective. And you know that you can trust the detective. Because he will found the bad guy. He will punish the bad guy. And you know, the readers, they know that they can trust the writer. And they know that the end will be okay. They will catch the bad guy. It's not like that in life. So maybe that's why people like to read thrillers. Because the world is so simple. There is a murder, And we can't solve the problem, so we need a detective. He's coming, he's doing the job for us. He's cleaning the well, and everything is okay again. So that's why I think it's very romantic and naive books, even if full with blood and murder. But my style, because I'm a woman, my style is to write with humor. And I think the combination between murder, terrible murders, and humor, and nice ladies who are solving the problem, that's what my audience like, my readers like. Something to be serious about it is about the women. You know that women wrote thriller from the beginning. You mentioned Agatha Christie, the sister, the Daphne du Maurier, and so on. Now, women are not only writing the books, not only play like bodies or victims in the books, but we are now the detectives. We are the judge or the doctor, the pathologist, who are finding the problem and solve the problem. But what I really wanted to talk to you today is about the stage I've been in my life. I was a teacher of special education. I even built a school for children with learning disabilities. And then I went to another stage. I became a spokeswoman of Akademi, the National Theatre of Israel. And only when I became 50, I decided to do what I really wanted to do, to write. But it was the last stage. Surprisingly, now I'm in the other stage. And I'm now the chairperson of Gnazim, as my friend may have mentioned. So what is Gnazim? What is so special about Gnazim? Let's begin with the story. You know, writers collect stories, like stories. One of our very prominent poets, Shaul Chernyakhovsky, that's a Russian name, very difficult to pronounce, Chernyakhovsky, who was, he was a doctor. He sat in his hospital office sometime in the 30s, many years ago. And suddenly he was inspired. An idea came to his mind. He wanted to write a poem. He wanted to write it down, but no, of course, in the 30s, no WhatsApp, no computer, nothing. So he really wanted to do it. So where can he do it? So he found, on his desk, he found a calendar. Just a calendar, the name, the date. And he wrote his poem here. On the other side. On the other side. That is the first side. He wrote the poem. And we have it in museum. That's a very unique moment when the poet was created. We have it. Here it is, Gnazim. And the other guy is not the only one. People don't really want to write, and they need to do it immediately. Not tomorrow. They have to catch the idea. So they do it. Everywhere they found something they wrote. And we in Gnazim, we have it. We have these special moments where the idea came and we keep it. And we have something like 100 archive of personal archive from writers and poets. And it's very interesting. People are coming from all over the world to research particular archive. And this calendar, of course, is there, and letters and manuscript, and letters, which is very important, and document and photos, and everything is there. A huge place, and we walk around and visit us. You know that I want to tell you that not only that we have millions, and there are some statements I will show it to you later, but I want to finish the story with another story. You remember our friend, can you do it? Funny story. When I came here, I saw a statue at the beginning, downstairs, of Rabindranath Tagore. Write a story, remember? Many years ago, the beginning of, the year is 1930. Berlin, Habima, our national theater, is giving premiere for Shakespeare, one of Shakespeare's plays. George Tchaikovsky, Richard May, also Richard May, for the big poet, the prominent poet, came because he translated from Russia to Hebrew. He came to the premiere to be there. Suddenly he saw in the audience, he saw a priest. What he's doing there? So he asked people, what he's doing there? And they say, come, meet the guy. So he met Rabindranath Tagore, who really liked Israel and Jewish. He's not Israel, he's Zionist. And they met. And here is the meeting, I don't know, I prepare some for you, the meeting between our great poet and your philosopher and great poet. And you know that even Tchaikovsky translate his name. And you know, we ask you, listen, I have a big question to ask you. How I translate your name? Is it Tagore or Tagore? I don't know. And he said, just Tagore. So now we have a street there named Tagore, like he told Tchaikovsky to do. So I have some, so you can see.
With the signature of Tagore is there.
Tagore is there, yes. So take it. I'm sorry, I didn't know that it would be so popular. So I prepared only 20, so I'm sorry to do it maybe later. So when you will come to Israel, please come to us. You will have a very nice tour to see all this treasure of the Israeli Writer Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, as I say, Dr. Dorit Zilberman, she's a prominent writer, and she's also the Vice President of the Hebrew Writers Association. Please, Dr. Dorit Zilberman.
Thank you. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to be here because I'm connected to India in more than one way. My last novel takes place in India, based on true story because one of my daughters were here and we thought we lost her in the tsunami in 2004. After a long week, maybe the longest in my life, we found her. She's healthy, but this was the inspiration of my last novel. I talked about it with the delegation that came to Israel, so now I want to tell you about another book of mine that only last October translated into English, The Gate of Mercy. We got it as a secret of your family. My lecture is called The Healing Power of Writing. The healing is both for the writer and for the reader. It's a form of therapy, a way of giving chance to things in life that never had a chance before. Or in my case, when I lost my father, writing was a way of keeping him around for a while longer. On one hand, the book Gate of Mercy is very personal and is made of dreams, and on the other hand, it is based on a biblical story that is a key story in the history of the Jewish people. As I was saying, it's a personal story, especially because the main character is based on my father. Twice before his death, he dreamt that he must write his memoirs. He was very sick at the time. So I got him a sketchbook because it was hardcover, and I wanted to give him the feeling that it was a real book, as I was afraid that we won't have enough time to get it printed. But my father, who was a simple, hard-working man for most of his life, and was raised in a poor family, set the book I got him aside with great respect, and instead took a simple yellow writing block and wrote on both sides of each page, leaving no spaces, his whole life story of 64 years upon 17 pages. It wasn't what, so all I had to rely on were 17 pages, and they were just the tip of the iceberg in telling his life story. In any case, I couldn't touch it for over 10 years. It was too difficult. It was enough for me just look at his handwriting to get all emotional. One day, before I wrote the book, I had a dream about Bill Gates. When I woke up, I had the feeling that the dream was actually about my father. It was very odd, because the image of Bill Gates is an image of a very sophisticated, wealthy man, and I couldn't figure out why in my dream I combined the two, because I told you the background of my father. After a few days, I suddenly understood how to interpret the dream. Gates was the name of the neighborhood my father grew up in. And that was the trigger for me to start this book. And to start it off by writing about my father's childhood. During my writing, I realized I wanted to write only of the times that we didn't spend together. His childhood up to the age of 17, and his old age starting from the age of 76, which he never lived to experience. At the time I was in law school, getting ready for the bar exams, I was studying with a group of people when suddenly I started writing with my left hand, and I'm right-handed. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was my way to escape from the studying. My friends talking to me, but I didn't hear them. I was completely out of it, and I just kept on writing. And that's how I started writing this book. Later on I discovered that there is a theory about writing with the other hand as a way of reaching your inner child. So in order to write from the perspective of an 8-year-old boy, I used this technique. The theory says that when you write with your other hand, with the opposite hand, the one you are not usually writing with, you can reach the right wing of your brain. That is part of your brain that is responsible for the creativity, and creativity comes from your inner child. In addition to that, writing with your other hand makes you struggle with the actual activity of writing and with coordination, just as in first grade. During the time I was writing the first part of the book, I had a second dream, in which I sat with some people in a living room when my cell phone started ringing. And on the other end, I heard my father's voice. He said to me, "I now feel that I can grow up." My father's family was one of the patriarchal families that kept a distance between the parents and the kids. So it was very unlike him to say such a thing to me. So I was overwhelmed. I replied to him, "Wait a moment," and I ran to the other room to get some privacy. But when I got there, the call was disconnected. I couldn't understand the meaning of the dream. So I asked a friend of mine, who was an author as well, and he said that it was a work-related dream, and asked, "How old is my main character?" I replied, "It is an 8-year-old. He says, "Okay, this kid is telling you that he can grow up now." So that's when I moved to the second part to write about him as a 17 years old. That was the practical interpretation to the dream. But the symbolic interpretation led me to finish the whole book with that line, because one of my conclusions is that you never stop growing up. As I said in the beginning, the book is also based on a key story in the history of the Jewish people. The story of Isaac and Ishmael, which is better known as the story of Abraham, his wife Sarah, and his serving maid Hagar. Do you know this? Are you familiar with this story? Sarah couldn't have a child, so she agreed that Abraham, our founding father, would have a kid and have a son with Hagar, a serving maid. This was Ishmael, but then she succeeded to give birth, and her son, she named it Isaac. And now she insisted that her husband will send Hagar and her son away. I tried in the book not to get, and I wanted to deal with the Israeli-Arab conflict. I tried in the book not to get caught up with the social, political Jewish-Arab debate, but rather to try and look at the conflict with a different view, to revive the biblical message from God to Hagar, that Ishmael will become the father of a people of his own, but that his people will never be completely separated from Isaac's people. And therefore, there is no point in disengagement. The only way to reconcile is that both sides will go through the gate of mercy. This is the name of my book, together. This is based on the actual gate in Jerusalem with all the legends that surround it, and the metaphorical one. My novel, as if the biblical story is now told from the perspective of the 8-year-old Isaac, if the Bible would have let him speak. And if it were happened in Israel, not only on the biblical time, but in 1936 and 1947. Those are three main crossroads of the Israel-Arab conflict. This biblical story, and the second one is in 1936, the Arab Rebellion, and 1947 till 1948, of course, the Independence War and the foundation of the State of Israel. I tried to examine these three crossroads and check out the characters of them, the characteristics of them. I don't have the ultimate answer to the big question in our life in Israel, how to make peace with our neighbors, but I have one certain conclusion, that we could never really be separated. So that's why we must find a way to cooperate and live together. Thank you very much.
Well, our delegation is, after we put out the names and coordinate with the Foreign Office and elsewhere, we found out that, well, there are 5 females and only 1 male. And okay, it came out by chance. Don't get the idea that there are no male writers in Israel. Full of them. It came out by chance. Okay, we could correct it. No, we could change some names, but we said to ourselves, no, why? Why? Those were the names chosen.
We are good.
They are the best, and that's our delegation. So Professor Avivit Levy will speak now a short speech.
So I was asked to talk about the revival of the Hebrew language and myself. Well, the Hebrew revival is a unique process in which the language usage changed from the sacred language of Judaism to a spoken and written language used for daily life in Israel. It took place in Europe and Israel towards the end of the 19th century and the 20th century. There are no other examples of a natural language without any native speakers, subsequently acquiring several million such native speakers, and no other examples of sacred language becoming a national language with millions of first language speakers. The language revival eventually brought linguistic additions with it. The created language includes characteristics derived from all periods of Hebrew. We have an ancient language. Historical records testify to the existence of Hebrew from the 10th century before Common Era to the late Second Temple period lasting to 70 Common Era. after which the language developed into Mishnaic Hebrew. After the 2nd century, Hebrew had not been spoken as a mother tongue. Even so, during the Middle Ages, Jews used the language in a wide variety of disciplines, which kept alive a substantial portion of the traits characteristics of Hebrew. Classical Hebrew was preserved in well-recognized sources, the Bible, Mishnah, prayers, Midrash, etc. During the Middle Ages, Hebrew continued in use as a written language in rabbinical literature, even though it was not natural, it was heavy, non-grammatical forms and mixing in other languages. But Hebrew was not used only in written form. It was also used as an articulated language in synagogues and B'tei Midrash. Thus, the Hebrew phonology and the pronunciation of vowels and consonants were preserved. Regional influences of other languages caused many changes, of course, leading to the development of different forms of pronunciation, what is known as Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Yemenite. The revival of Hebrew and practice advanced in two parallel streams, written literary and spoken, where the written literary developed mainly in Europe cities, and the spoken language developed in Israel. The first writers in the revival of Hebrew were secular, and they wanted to distance themselves from rabbinic Judaism, so they decided to write in a biblical style. And while it was natural to them to write in Hebrew stories taking place in the era of the Bible and telling stories about people from the Bible, they found it more and more difficult to write about contemporary topics, mostly due to the lack of a broad and modern vocabulary. Another difficulty was that their audience was very limited because they needed male kind of readers that had a profound background. Women and less educated men were pushed against reading Hebrew. A very important person in this situation was Eliezer ben Yehuda, which is often regarded as the reviver of the Hebrew language. He was the first to raise the concept of reviving Hebrew. He published articles in newspapers on the topic, and he took part in what is known the Ben Yehuda Dictionary. His main innovation lies in inventing new words for things that were not known, objects unknown in Jewish antiquity, such as electricity. So he invented the word chashmal. Anyway, the revived Hebrew is the language of the transformation of the Jews into the Hebrew nation with its own land. The founders of the modern state of Israel had an image of a melting pot to the process of Jews from different regions and countries coming to Israel, each with their own language, traditions, and culture. They thought it would create a unified Israeli character. Whether it reflects the reality is a question. Anyway, we are an example of this anthropology tribe. I can tell you that my grandparents from both sides came from Yemen, but my husband came from France, and his grandparents came from Turkey and Spain. So our extended family speaks several languages: Hebrew, French, Ladino, Spanish, and Arabic. And I will share with you a poem from this melting pot. A foreign bride. From that evening, I particularly remember one moment just before the ceremony where, excited or absent-minded, you did not cover my face with a veil. Nobody said a word, just your mother's face were dumbstruck. One moment does not tell it all. It is by mistake that memory extracts, especially this moment, of all the rest. Nevertheless, since then, I memorize a foreign language and family grammars. My personal relation to the Hebrew revival is not just being an Israeli writer. I'm co-producing an annual event dedicated for the Hebrew language with cooperation of Netanya City called Cultural Hall and the Hebrew Writers Association. We call it Mila Sheli, which means my word. The name is based on a phrase assuring an obligation of the speaker. But the literal sense is the word is mine. I am attached and connected to the words and to the Hebrew language. Hundreds of people coming to this event every year demonstrate that they share this feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. So now Smadar Shir will share us her thoughts. You remember Smadar Shir is a well-known Israeli writer. She is known especially for her children's book, and everybody knows them.
Hi, good afternoon. This is my third visit in India, and I love India. For me, I have a chance to come to the blessing, but I'm very, I do not tell them anything later because when I sit in front of my computer and I just press this first letter, I have no idea where to take me. So I prefer not to prepare a speech, but to talk with you as you will make friends. I started to write before I knew, before I learned writing or reading. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I would come to the kitchen in the afternoon, and my mother was cooking or baking, and I started to read, but I started to say, to pronounce a long poem with rhymes, and my mom would say, wait a minute, they have to bring a piece of paper and write it down, and the day later, when she wrote me to the kindergarten, she would ask the teacher, did you learn yesterday a song, a poem about the shy moon? And the teacher said no. My mom said, okay, so my daughter invented one more song. Nobody did, nobody thought it's unique or special. And since I grew up in a very religious family, and since I grew up, that's because I'm short, I cannot mention. Since I grew up in a very religious family, nobody thought that writing can be a professional or because one of there was a very famous sentence in the Bible, production of Melech Mima, which means that the daughter of the king has to keep her dignity inside, not to show, not to express it outside. So when I was when I was asked, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I said, well, all I want is to write, you know. And my mom would say, no, you're not allowed to write. I'm a teacher. Go to university, get a degree in teaching. It's a very good job. You get vacations with your children, so you don't have to look for babysitter. And I remember I was thinking this and dreaming, but I don't want to be a teacher. I cannot have any job from 9 to 5 every day the same. I said I'd rather go and walk in the field and collect flowers or eggs, just not do something so boring. Although my parents did their best to separate between me and my first typewriter machine, which was Ernest Baby. He's talking about Soviet Ernest Baby, you know. I published my first book when I was 16 years old. And ever since then, I hear all the time the same question. Why do you write? Today, I travel all over Israel to give lectures in schools and kindergarten, and sometimes I'm invited to school because they named the school after me, although I'm alive, as you can see. The kids would ask me, do you write because you want to change the world? Or do you write because you want to make the world greener, better place? And I stand and I hear those questions, and every time I have the same problem. I don't know if to tell the truth or to lie. Because the teachers and the principals would like very much to hear me say, yes, I believe that literature can change the world, and I believe that if kids, the children start to read, to connect with literature, they can change their perspective of life and so on. But look, I don't want to lie. I don't write in order to change or to teach or to create a new world. I write just because I like to write. That's all. Okay. But I'm a mother of 6 children, and I have 2 granddaughters. And when I started to publish books, to write books for children, it was about the same time I started a family. And my first books, my first children's books, grew up from the life in our family. For example, my first daughter came, she saw me very pregnant, and she asked, what do you have in your tummy? So I wrote a book, what my mom is fed, what does she have in her tummy? Is it a balloon, an elephant, and etc. Then I wrote a book about how the first child in the family accepts the second or the third child. I wrote a book about a boy asking his mom, now that you are nursing the baby, do you still love me? And the mom is rocking in the rocking chair, back and forth, right? And then he says, you see, my hands are busy right now, but my heart is not busy. My heart is going and enlarging with every child. And now that I became a grandma, although it sounds very stupid to say in Hebrew, grandma's Nadar, because Nadar is a modern name, although it's from the Bible, it's a new name, and putting it next to grandma is a little bit fun. בקרב just wrote a book, סבתא שמתי תבוא אליי, grandma, when you come to visit me. And that's the granddaughter asking and the child, and grandma, the child is asking the grandma, when will you come to visit me? And the grandmother is ignoring the grandma. She says, well, I can come only on the weekend. I'm working. I have lots of meetings all over Israel. But she says, you know, when I leave Jerusalem, I'll buy you this present. I don't need this present. So when I leave Tel Aviv, I'll buy you this present. No, I don't need this present. And they go almost all over Israel until the child says, I want you. And the grandma says, really? So open the door. I just open the door. That's one part of my writing. Because these days, after almost 40 years of writing, when I'm asked, do you write because you want to change the world? And I said no, and I write for myself. I found out that when I'm happy and the kids are okay and everything, and there's no war for change, and everybody is peaceful, those are the good times in my life when I feel strong enough to deal with hard topics. Because when the situation is sad, when I have problems with children, with my husband, with the dogs, with Mr. Netanyahu or whatever, then I write very funny or very funny stories because I want to make me happy. So if I write something funny or nice, I'm cheerful and it's okay. But when I write something when everything is okay and I feel strong enough, that's when I allow myself to touch a difficult topic. And I brought you one example. This book is named The Tenth. In Hebrew, that's called Ha'asiri. The Tenth. And it tells the story of an 11-year-old boy who wakes up in the hospital. He hardly remembers what happened. He was asleep he was unconscious for 2 weeks almost. After one Saturday, sunny and happy Saturdays that he walked with his parents to the beach, Israel is the one to the beach. After the beach, they came to a restaurant to eat together lunch, and there was a terror attack. His mother was died. His father was hardly injured. And he, the boy, during the 2 weeks that he was unconscious, he had 9 operations. During those 9 operations, the doctors did their best to save his life. All those operations were life or death. But now he woke up and he heard that his mother is dead, that his father is severely injured. The doctors, for the first time, gave him the opportunity to choose. They asked him, would you like to have the 10th operation? And they explained to him that the 10th operation is not life or death. It's a plastic surgery in order to take out all the pieces of the bone that were stuck under his skin. Meaning that the 10th operation is, he has to decide if he wants to live all his life with these 2 pieces of bones in his face and to be like a living terror attack forever, or if rather to have surgery, to have a better skin, and maybe to forget. And this is a very severe dilemma for everyone, especially when you are 11 and your mom is no longer next to you. I don't want, excuse me, but I don't want to tell you what is the end of the story. You can Google the 10th and find it in Amazon. It was translated to English. It was published, and also it was on Amazon. It was very popular there. Readers said they never thought about this aspect of life in Israel. And this time the book is translated into Chinese, which apparently they are also very curious about the Hebrew literature, and especially children's Hebrew literature. So if I go back to begin to my first sentence, now that I have grandchildren and I think about them, about the world that I'm going to live with them, I feel that it's my duty to write more about what I call difficult topics. I think that a child in Israel cannot grow up without sitting in a shelter, and it has to be written. I will not write a diary of a child in the shelter. I will do it differently, because we have 2 dogs, and they already had 2 dogs. And when they did the assignment, they are the first to run to the shelter. So I will write this. I will bring my point of view about war during the eyes of the child who is running to the shelter after the dog, because they woke up at night and he didn't hear the shelter, the silence that the dog made. I think it's very important for children in Israel to read about 15 years old boy from Eritrea that walked to Israel with his parents to find life, to find a job, and now they want to deport all of them out of Israel. You know, many years ago we had a lady from the Philippines cleaning around her house, and when the government was just starting to talk about deporting all the foreign workers out of Israel, my youngest daughter told me that she wants to build a place in the shelter for this lady. And she said, I will hide her as the good people in the Holocaust were hiding Jewish people to save their life. And I believe that this is the duty of Hebrew children literature, to bring the situation from different eyes and to bring them as stories, not as essays. And I do it, it's not easy for me because I always be happier to write about cheerful things. But this is our duty, and as it turned out, I found out that those are the books that are translated to foreign languages and publishing all over the world. So I thank the Lord that He gave me this opportunity to send my will all over.
Thank you so much. We will, thank you. We will conclude with poet Chava Pinchas Cohen. Please come. And then we will go on hearing from you.
When to be the last one, it's a little difficult. But I'll change my theme and I'll try to
I will start with reading the poem, but I'll do something that I'll read it first in Hebrew. We are talking here about languages, we are talking about delegation from Israel, but I would like first of all that you hear the sound of Hebrew, and then I'll read it also in English. For me, Hebrew is a kind of music, and especially when it is in poetry must be music, otherwise it's not. So give me this chance, and if you don't understand, just listen to the sound. And this poem that I choose to start with is a prayer. Prayer is a mother's prayer before the dawn. 4 o'clock in the morning, with my third child. That was the time that I took for myself before nursing, and I found myself suddenly writing this poem. This child, today she is 27. תפילה להם בטרם שחרית. בשעה שאני עומדת לבשל דייסת צולת, חסר ממני כל מיני מחשבות זרות. וכשאני נוגעת בגב התינוק ומד החומו, שילכו ממני כל מיני פרדות, שלא יבלבלו מחשבותיי. ותן לי אומץ לזכך פניי, שיוכל כל אחד מילדיי לראות פניו בתוך פניי, כמו במראה רחוצה לקראת חג. ואת החושך המשוקע מפנים פניי, עשה באור, שלא תפקע סבלנותי ולא יחר גרוני מצעקה מתחבטת ומתאבא, שלא יהיה לי רפיון ידיים מול הבלתי נודע, ושלא ייפסק אף לא לרגע מגע בשר ובשר ביני לבין ילדיי. תן בי אהבתך, שיהיה בי די לעמוד בפתח הבית ולחלקה בפשטות, בפורסים לחם ומורים חנאה כל בוקר מחדש, ניחוח עליו רותח וגולש וריח קפה מכסים, על קורבן תודה וקורבן תמיד, שאיני יודעת איך נותנים. At the hour when I'm about to cook porridge, may all my strange thoughts recede, and when I touch my baby's bed to check his temperature, let all my troubles leave me and not confuse my thoughts. Give me the strength to wash my face so that each one of my children will see his face in mine like a mirror cleaned for a holiday. And may the darkness that is sunk within my face be covered with light, so that my passion not break, nor my throat bow parched from a troubled thinking scream, may not, from a troubled thinking scream, may I not become powerless against the unknown, and may I never cease for even a moment to feel the touch of my children's flesh against my own. Give me your love so that I will have enough of it in me to stand at my doorway, sharing it simply as slicing bread and spreading butter each morning anew, the aroma of boiling milk overflowing and the lingering smell of coffee, is an offering of thanks and an eternal offering that I do not know how to give. I choose that poem, which today, I mean, just to show you my daughter's we are living in Jerusalem, and from time to time came and said, we saw this poem on the refrigerator of somebody without the name of the poet. Sometimes they put the name of the child in it. So it became very popular. It went away. It's a prayers book everywhere. But what I'm saying is, I will try to connect myself to the other stories that were here, and to say something about my biography, which is not, although it's my own biography, it's also connected with the history of last century of my people and the state of Israel. Not that I choose, but that's it. Hebrew, it's very, what I found here, that we are speaking both our Hebrew and your language are very ancient. And using ancient language for poetry, it's a treasure. It can be a treasure, and sometimes it can be the opposite, because it can block something very modern, very fluent. But on the other hand, if you know how to use the layers of your ancient language, then it can become very rich. And you can imagine that in Israeli poetry there are two schools. Those who are going to the layers and going deep to the sources of the language, and those who say, no, I want when it's mountain, it wants when the house, it's a house. It doesn't mean cattle, and it doesn't have to have all. I want to say what I want freely, without all these layers. Well, I choose the other school. I live in layers of language and layers of time. And how it happened? Well, I was born in Israel 10 years after the Second World War. Well, I didn't realize that I was 10 years after the Second World War. It's only lately that I understood it. My parents came from Europe as refugees right after the war. And lately I understood that I found out that my father spent 2 years in Cyprus. On his way to Israel, he was stopped by the British mandate, and he was there for 2 years, blocked with other people. 55,000 people were blocked there in order not to get them to get to their new home, to the land of Israel. Well, I didn't know anything about it. It's only lately I started knowing it. And but I was born as the first generation of reduction. That was maybe some other friends of mine, that was the name. The first generation of reduction. We are new, we are something special. And that's how we know it. But it was very interesting that my parents spoke wonderful Hebrew, but without layers. It was a very communicative Hebrew, very fast, easy, but something was missing. And sometimes I wrote from school, from kindergarten, words, and they learned from me. We were a generation that we taught our parents something about the language, the Hebrew new language. But there was something else. I was starting reading when I was 4 years old, and I would spend all my time reading. And in fact, I enriched my language by reading, and especially translated books into Hebrew. So I'm really thankful to the writers. I will mention their names for my friends like Aaron Amir, Leah Goldberg, famous names in Israel that really took their time to translate from Russian, from Portuguese, from English into Hebrew, and that's the way they enlarged the Hebrew language by using new words or looking for words to give to the new generation. But when I was in school, I found out that my surprised me that by meeting friends from other cities, some of them were very religious, and students of yeshiva, that my language is limited, is almost censorized, which means I know the modern Hebrew, I know the biblical Hebrew, but there are layers that I never knew about them. That the early medieval Hebrew, medieval and late 18th, 19th century, that was usually in manuscripts or what we call, maybe you heard this word, and also it mentioned Mishnah, Talmud, and big manuscript. Then it made me crazy. I felt like crippled in my own language, like there's something missing. So I started learning, and I still am all layers of my culture, my Judaism. And in fact here, in my bag, I have part of the Zohar book, which is the Jewish mysticism. I mean, I cannot leave home without having it in my bag. Why is this? First of all, it gives me a kind of confidence that even if I'm lost somewhere, I have my book, my Hebrew with me, and I can always get it in it. But it also, each time I read a new page, it brings me new layers and enlarge my view of my own language, either for my writing as a poet or a short story. I'm writing also short stories, and or my essays or whatever. It means it gives me a lot. But I can tell you that this is also a kind of fate of my generation, that part of us are looking always for our identities, either by biography or by building their own language, which is, you can ask, what do you have to build? It's 4,000 years old, that's enough. But no, and also, just to give you another dimension, you know that many young Israelis are here in what we call the East, India, Nepal, and other places. And in many places, I have pictures. I haven't been there, my daughters have been, that are Hebrew words written in Nepal, like in a restaurant, we call falafel or misada, or different Hebrew words are written in kiosks in different places. And then there is a search now for this language that is spreading all over the world, and it's total secular language. I mean, this is a language that has kind of wings for itself and for kind of communication among young generation that know exactly the motives and what, as it says, sometimes even behind. Like, stop here, you'll find this. Stop here, you'll find that. Well, I'm not familiar with it at all, but I love this for my daughters and their generation. There were one of my daughters that spent like half a year in India and Nepal. She said, "Mommy, it's not a place for you in India." And then after a while I said, "You know what? Yes, go there, you have to." I said, "Why?" She said, "You'll find something that you cannot understand in Israel. You'll find the freedom before monopolism." Well, she knows me and the way I'm dealing with religion, etc. She said, something even biblical. Well, I thought she understood something. Last night, when we had this wonderful ceremony, with the words and then the performance, and I saw this dancing, I understood the passion of rituals that is still here, and the freedom of movement that is still here, and also something that is antique about feminism, feminine, not feminism as a being feminine before Christianity. That for me, that Christianity destroyed something deep about women's sexuality, and I found it here, and I said to myself, yes, there is something that I will look for it. And something about this poem that I just read, it's beside the feeling, it deals with ritual. That's why I thought it deals with ritual that the woman does alone with herself, because without this ritual, she will not reach something she is missing. And even sacrifice, today we used to give sacrifices, you know, in Judaism, when we had the temple, when I wanted to say thank you God for the child you gave me, I used to go to the temple and with sacrifice and say thank you. This is a sacrifice for thank you. Without, this was a woman ritual, and I don't have it. Today we don't do that. We are very abstract. So in this prayer, I try to compose something that is ritual and it's abstract at the same time with the help of the language. So thank you very much, and I'm really honored to be here, and I think that I learned a lot about this wonderful institute that you made that brings different languages of the same country together with a dialogue, and I'm doing something opposite. I made a kind of conference for Jewish writers that each one is writing in a different language all over the world, but when we are coming together, we are speaking about ourselves and our identities in one language.